You love your parents. This video is not about not loving them, but somewhere in your childhood, in the small moments, in the patterns that repeated, in the feelings that were left unmet, something was missing. Not cruelty, not drama, just a consistent emotional gap between what you needed and what was available. If some of what you're about to hear feels familiar, it's not a coincidence, and it's not your fault. Psychologist Lindsay C. Gibson, whose research on emotionally immature parents has become one of the most widely recognized frameworks in modern developmental psychology, defines emotional immaturity as a specific set of limitations in a person's ability to regulate their own emotions, tolerate discomfort, and respond to the emotional needs of others. Emotionally immature parents are not necessarily cruel, absent, or obviously harmful. They can be loving, hardworking, genuinely devoted, but they lack the internal resources to hold space for another person's emotional reality, particularly when that person's needs conflict with their own. And children of emotionally immature parents grow up in a specific kind of environment, one where they learn to manage the adults rather than be managed by them. Sign 1. Their emotions dominated the room. When they were upset, everyone felt it. Their moods set the emotional temperature of the household. Their anxiety became everyone's anxiety. Their anger became everyone's alarm. And your emotional needs, when they conflicted with theirs, came second, always. Sign 2. They couldn't tolerate your negative emotions. When you were sad, scared, or angry, the response wasn't curiosity or comfort. It was discomfort, dismissal, an attempt to make the feeling stop as quickly as possible. You're fine. Stop crying. You're overreacting. Not because they didn't care, but because your emotional distress triggered their own, and they had no tools to manage either. Sign 3. They made your problems about themselves. You came to them with something that was hard for you, and somehow, in a way you couldn't always articulate, the conversation shifted to their own similar experience, to how your problem affected them, to their own feelings about your problem. You left the conversation having taken care of them rather than having been taken care of. Sign 4. They expected you to manage their emotions. The burden moved in the wrong direction. You learned to read their moods before you expressed your own, to smooth things over before they escalated, to be the emotional regulator in a relationship where the adult should have been regulating for you. Psychologists call this emotional parentification, and its effects on adult functioning are among the most consistent findings in developmental research. Sign 5. They were defensive when you expressed needs. Trying to tell them something was hard, something they did that hurt you, something you needed that wasn't there, was met not with curiosity, but with defensiveness, with denial, counterattack, guilt, tears. The conversation immediately became about protecting them rather than hearing you. And you learned, don't bring this up again. Sign 6. Connection felt conditional. Their warmth and attention arrived more reliably when you were performing well, behaving correctly, meeting their expectations, and withdrew, sometimes subtly, sometimes not, when you weren't. The love was real, but so was its conditionality, and you internalized, without being told, that you were more lovable when you were easier to love. Sign 7. They had difficulty with genuine apology. When they did something that hurt you, a real acknowledgement of it was rare. Apologies, when they came, were often partial, conditional, reversed into your fault, or followed immediately by the same behavior, because genuine apology requires sitting with the discomfort of having caused harm, and emotional immaturity makes that almost impossible to sustain. Sign 8. They used you as emotional support. You knew more about your parents' fears, frustrations, and relationship problems than a child should. Not because you asked, because they told you, because you were safe, because you listened, because you were available in a way their adult relationships weren't. And you became, over time, a confidant rather than a child. Sign 9. They struggled with your separateness. Your developing opinions, preferences, and independence were experienced as threatening. Not celebrated, threatening, as if your becoming your own person was a withdrawal of love rather than a natural development. And so you learned to manage your autonomy carefully, expressing it only in ways that wouldn't activate their anxiety or hurt. Sign 10. You felt alone even when they were there. This is the quietest one. and often the most painful, not physically absent, present, in the room, at the table, but not fully available in the way that mattered most, not curious about your inner world, not responsive to your emotional experience, not able to meet you where you actually were. And the loneliness of that, of being with someone and still feeling unseen, is a specific kind of ache that many children of emotionally immature parents carry into adulthood without ever having a name for it. Here's what these 10 signs have in common. They all describe a childhood in which the emotional work moved in the wrong direction, where the child regulated for the adult, where the child's needs came after the adult's comfort, where connection was earned rather than given, and the adult who grew up in that environment carries specific patterns: a hypervigilance to other people's emotions, a difficulty identifying and asking for their own needs, a tendency to take care of others at the expense of themselves, and a quiet, persistent sense that their own inner world is somehow less important than the worlds of the people around them. None of these are character flaws. They are adaptations. Intelligent, functional, understandable adaptations to an environment that required them. Here's the part that matters most. Emotionally immature parents are almost never villains. They are people who were not given what they needed, emotionally, developmentally, often across generations, who never had the tools modeled for them, who did the best they could with what they had. Understanding this is not the same as excusing it. What happened to you was real. The gap was real. The adaptations it required were real, and you are allowed now, as an adult, to grieve that gap, to understand where your patterns came from, to choose, slowly and with support, which patterns you want to carry forward and which ones you're ready to put down. The relationship your parents had with their own emotions is not the relationship you have to have with yours. That is something you can change. If this video described something you recognize, share it with someone who needs to hear it named. And subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the behaviors, the patterns, the things about being human that nobody explains.